The following is InfoVisual Shop Floor, version 908, Service Pack 2. Visual Shop Floor has been enhanced to include a whole new section, Purchasing. Options underneath the Purchasing module include Receiving Entry, Receipt Return Entry, PO Lines Due, as well as PO Lines Received. Let's begin the review by looking at Security options as well as preference settings. Starting with the visual application, I'm going to go into Security Users. Here I have a few users set up, and you can notice that I can restrict who can see which modules. In this case here, we're going to focus on Fred, and you'll notice that he does not have mobile labor, but he does have mobile material. Let's log into Shop Floor using Fred's information, and you'll notice that he will only see the scheduling and the two applications for mobile material. Next, we'll go back into Security, this time choosing Profile User Settings, and we'll select the user and get into Program Component Security after selecting Shop Floor, and you'll notice that down at the bottom will be all of the purchasing settings added to this list. Now let's take a look at the preferences. Underneath the preference menu, I'm going to go to the new tab for purchasing. Inside of here, you'll notice that there are three. Similar to other Shop Floor transaction entries, we are able to go through and confirm transactions, as well as announce transactions accepted. On a user level, you can go through and autofill received quantity when you do a purchase order receipt. Note that when this flag is off in selecting a row, the user must fill in the quantities received. Let's now go and review the entries, starting with receiving entry, as well as receipt return entry. So selecting purchasing, then drilling over to receiving entry. In receiving entry, I can either select the purchase order ID or the dispatch ID if it is a service. Using the browse, I will select the purchase order to receive. And here's my purchase order, and it also brings across the vendor information and addressing for the receipt. Down below, I can enter in information based upon that receipt. There's also a configuration table that you can work with, and you can see all the columns that are currently available inside of purchase receipt entry inside of Shop Floor. Next, we can focus on the toolbars that are inside of the receiving window. Selecting a row, I can now browse the PO line details. Back in receiving entry, I'm going to go through and select my second row, which has a delivery schedule attached. I will view the delivery schedule from here. Using this dialog, I can enter in the quantities per delivery schedule. Selecting the third row now, we can see the trace information for that line. In this dialog, I can go through and enter in the properties for trace. The third row also includes a direct link to a work order. Pressing the links toolbar, I can go through and review the information for that link. Note that this dialog also includes flags to identify status of this current order. Additionally, users can also configure this display. Receiving entry also includes a toolbar for vendor information. The next toolbar manages documents for this current purchase order receipt. Here you can see that I have existing documents I can review, I can add, and I can also grab from existing references. Pictures can also be reviewed here inside of PO line receipt. The picture is coming from part maintenance. The last toolbar to display for a receiving line will be labels. Getting into the label dialog, here you'll notice that I'm able to go through, either do it by a label or do it by group. I'll select my current label, and here's where I can actually put in the print quantity. The next application we can review will be receipt return entry. Here you'll notice I can go through, select my purchase order. Lines that have been received will show up in the display. The selection could have also been made by retrieving the receiver ID. Highlighting the row, I can go through and enter in the quantity that's going to be returned. Similar to receiving entry, I have the following toolbars I can also use to view information. The next application to be reviewed for purchasing will be the purchase order lines due. So from the purchasing menu, I can go over and do purchase order lines due. When you open up the application, the main sort is by from date and to date, so you can specify a range. I can also filter it down to just service. Any service that is out there will display. I can also go through and display more fields of more search parameters. Vendor ID, commodity code, warehouse ID, part ID, and service ID. All of the fields have browse capabilities. Toolbars are also available in this dialog. We've already covered detail, vendor detail, and document toolbars. The last toolbar on this dialog will allow us to drill back to receiving entry for the selected purchase order. Going back into purchase order lines due, I can also show you two more display items. Starting with the show row filter, users can control the number of rows being displayed. We also have the configure columns, and a new feature added for the configure columns is up here in the top right hand side, where I can move different columns around. I'm going to move line number up to the top of the list, for example. Or if I want to, I can go back and refresh it to the original display, and line number moves back down to its original spot. Let's show you one that will come to the main screen. I'm going to select flags as an example. I'll move the flags to the top of my list. I'll press OK and go back to the main display. And now on the left hand side you can see the flags of the first column to be identified. And you can see that all of my rows are due, and that's the purchase late. The purchase order is late. And you can see that I have a couple on the bottom where the operation is late. Let's review the final PO option, PO lines received. In this window I do have the date range that I can put in to review which purchase orders are out in that date range. I can limit it to service receipts only as well. We do have the additional browse areas of vendor ID, commodity code, warehouse ID, part ID, and service ID. On the right hand side, of course, again, we have the show rows selection, as well as the configure line table, and the new option to be able to configure is up in the header again. We have toolbars where you can drill down to see details. I'm going to choose PO line details in this case. We can also look at drilling back further. I can actually open up a receipt return entry by pressing the browse button, and I'll be able to do a return of this current receipt. Version 9.08 Service Pack 2 includes two additional items that I will cover now. The scan icon has been added, as well as the customizable tables will appear in other places inside of ShopFloor. Starting at the main menu, I'm going to go over to Work Order Materials. And here you'll notice that the scan mode is on, and up here in the left hand corner is an example of the scan icon. So where scanning is needed, the icon will appear. Display applications throughout the ShopFloor module have been updated with the configure table. Here's an example of the work order transaction table where it's primarily a view. Those columns can be modified with Service Pack 2. Thank you for watching this video. For Infor Visual ShopFloor version 9.08 Service Pack 2.